The small lab was quiet, the air thick with the hum of machines and the low murmur of researchers deep in concentration. Dr. Jonathan Hale, a renowned scientist with a reputation for pushing boundaries in the field of mystery research, had gathered his team for an unprecedented experiment. They had spent weeks preparing for this moment. The plan was simple: place a small hidden camera inside a coffin and observe what happened to a body over time. Could there be something beyond what science has discovered so far? Could the body reveal something unknown once sealed in a coffin? Dr. Hale had always been skeptical of paranormal theories. He wasn't looking for ghosts or spirits. He was searching for scientific data, something tangible. Still, there was an excitement in the air. Something about the sheer mystery of the unknown seemed to pull at everyone in the room. As the coffin was gently lowered onto the operating table, the team's excitement grew. This wasn't just about testing the limits of life and death. It was about exploring what happens to the body after death in a way no one had ever dared to do. Everyone was wondering, what would the camera capture? Dr. Hale's fingers hovered over the control panel as he checked the camera's angle one last time. The body inside was that of 40-year-old Thomas Richards, a man who had passed away under mysterious circumstances. There were no signs of foul play, but his death had left the community with many unanswered questions. This was the perfect opportunity to put their experiment to the test. "Let's get this started, Doctor," Hale said, his voice steady despite the nerves that tingled in the pit of his stomach. With a single press of the button, the camera clicked on. The hidden lens was now recording inside the sealed coffin, capturing every moment. For the first few minutes, everything was calm. The scientists observed the screen, looking for any signs of movement or change. The body remained still. But as the minutes passed, something strange started happening. A shift, almost imperceptible at first. The body inside the coffin twitched slightly. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough to catch Dr. Hale's attention. Could this be a spasm, he thought? No, it didn't look like any involuntary muscle twitch he had seen before. It was more calculated, almost as if the body was consciously moving. "What was that?" one of the assistants asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The tension in the room was thick as everyone turned their gaze to the monitor, their faces filled with disbelief. The body twitched again. This time, it was more pronounced. The arm of Thomas Richards lifted slightly from the surface of the coffin, moving in a slow, deliberate motion. It wasn't a convulsion or muscle response. It was something different, something unnatural. Dr. Hale's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't supposed to happen. There was no medical explanation for this kind of movement. What? What are we looking at?" one of the assistants muttered, stepping closer to the monitor. Dr. Hale's mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. Could it be some kind of delayed response from the nervous system? But this wasn't the typical response after death. And the way the body was moving, it looked too intentional. "Pause the footage," Dr. Hale ordered, his voice tense. "We need to analyze this." The team paused the feed, and everyone stared at the screen, watching the slight, deliberate movements of the body. They could see the fingers of Thomas Richards flex, as though the body was adjusting its position. The chest moved ever so slightly, almost as if the body was preparing to rise. No one had expected this. The body was supposed to be lifeless, completely still, but here they were, watching it move. For a moment, Dr. Hale questioned if what he was seeing was real. The body inside the coffin was not just a lifeless corpse. It was reacting. "This isn't possible," one of the assistants whispered. "Bodies don't do this." Dr. Hale couldn't deny the feeling creeping into his gut. The feeling that maybe they had just uncovered something far beyond the scope of science. Had they unlocked a secret? The seconds stretched into minutes. The body inside the coffin was still shifting, adjusting its position. The team exchanged nervous glances, each of them silently asking the same question. What was happening? Then just when they thought they had seen it all, the unthinkable happened. The camera, still recording, caught something chilling, a slight rise in the coffin lid. It wasn't much, just a barely noticeable movement, but enough to make everyone in the room freeze. "Is the coffin moving?" one of the researchers asked, his voice low. Everyone stared at the screen in complete silence. The lid of the coffin, which had been sealed, was now slightly ajar. Something was pushing against it from the inside. This was no accident. Something was alive inside that coffin. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the equipment running. The air felt thicker now, as if every breath in the room was loaded with anticipation. The scientists stared at the screen, wide-eyed and frozen in disbelief. The coffin lid, barely cracked, was still moving slightly. Something or someone inside was pushing against it. It was subtle, but it was unmistakable. Dr. Hale stood frozen, his eyes locked on the footage. His heart raced, and a cold sweat trickled down his back. Was this real? Was the body coming back to life? It seemed impossible, yet the evidence was there, playing out right in front of him. The movements were too deliberate to be involuntary. There was no doubt in his mind that the body was trying to do something. Escape, move, communicate. Pause it. Let's freeze the frame, Doctor. Hale ordered, his voice shaky but authoritative. His hands hovered over the controls, shaking ever so slightly as he activated the freeze frame. The body inside the coffin was now fully visible on the screen. The lid cracked open about 2 inches, with a hand clearly visible, gripping the inside of the coffin as if it was preparing to push itself out. The room was heavy with tension. The body shouldn't be moving, not after being dead for so long. One of the assistants, a young woman named Claire, stepped forward cautiously, her eyes glued to the screen. This can't be right, she whispered. It's impossible. He's supposed to be dead. There's no way his body could react like this. Dr. Hale didn't answer immediately. His mind was racing, trying to find a logical explanation for what they were witnessing. Could it be a post-mortem reflex? Could the body somehow still have electrical activity causing these movements? But nothing could explain the intentional nature of the movement. The hand gripping the edge of the coffin, it was trying to push up. We need to get a closer look, Dr. Hale finally said, his voice stern. Zoom in on the face. Let's see if we can get any signs of consciousness. The camera zoomed in, capturing every detail with eerie precision. As the lid of the coffin continued to shift, Daniel's face came into full view. His skin was pale, the features sharp and cold, but something was off. There was no decay. His face looked almost untouched. Lydia, another member of the team, gasped. His face! It's too perfect. He should be decomposing by now. Dr. Hale nodded, his brow furrowed in concern. This was not what they had expected. The body should have been far more decayed after 5 days in a sealed coffin, and yet it seemed almost frozen in time, untouched by the usual process of decomposition. It was as if Daniel's body was not following the natural order of things. Something had changed. It's like he's preserved, Lydia said softly, her eyes wide with disbelief. How is that possible? Dr. Hale wasn't sure how to answer. The science didn't add up. They had always thought they understood death, what happened after it, how long it took for a body to decompose. But now all of that was in question. As the camera zoomed in even closer, they could see Daniel's eyes still closed, but there was something different about them. There was a faint twitch of his eyelids, as if he were trying to open his eyes. It was subtle, but it was enough to make Lydia take a step back. He's alive, isn't he? She whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Dr. Hale's face grew pale, and for the first time in his career, he questioned everything he had ever known. Could it be possible? Could someone really come back from the dead? The idea sounded absurd, and yet the evidence was right there in front of him. They were witnessing something that science could not explain. We need to document everything. Every second, Dr. Hale's voice was firm now, as if he was trying to regain some control over the situation. Get the secondary cameras in place. I want everything recorded. We need to see if there's any change in his brain activity. The team scrambled to set up additional cameras and equipment to monitor the situation more closely. Every person in the room was on edge, unsure of what they were about to witness next. Were they about to uncover the impossible? Then, just as the team was setting up the secondary cameras, the unexpected happened. A loud crack echoed through the room. The coffin lid shifted dramatically. the sound of wood scraping against wood piercing the silence. The coffin lid began to lift, slowly, steadily, as if something inside was determined to break free. Dr. Hale's eyes widened. Stop. No more movement. But it was too late. The lid creaked and shifted with growing momentum, revealing more of the body inside. The coffin was opening on its own, the body's movements growing stronger. The hand that had been gripping the sides was now fully extended, pushing the lid up with more force. What the hell is going on? One of the assistants gasped, stepping back in fear. The lid creaked open, revealing Daniel's body, now fully visible, half risen from the coffin, his eyes wide open, staring into nothingness. He wasn't dead. He was alive, but not the way anyone had imagined. The room fell into an eerie silence as the team collectively leaned in, eyes glued to the screen. The coffin lid moved again, this time with more force. It wasn't just a slight shift now. It was as if something inside was trying to break free, to escape from its confines. Dr. Hale stood frozen for a moment, his mind racing with disbelief. The body of Thomas Richards, a man who had been confirmed dead for over a week, was now reacting to the environment. It was as though he was pushing against the lid from inside, trying to open it, trying to get out. "What the hell is going on, Lydia?" one of the research assistants whispered under her breath. Her voice trembled with a mix of fear and curiosity. The situation had escalated far beyond what anyone could have expected. The camera, still focused on the coffin, captured every chilling detail. The lid of the coffin, which had been securely sealed just moments before, was now rising slowly, inch by inch, as if something inside was struggling to push it open. The team members exchanged nervous glances, their faces pale with shock and fear. This was beyond scientific explanation. Dr. Hale's eyes narrowed as he analyzed the footage. "Increase the camera's sensitivity. Get a closer shot." His voice was steady, but the tension in his tone was unmistakable. He had spent years studying the human body, death, and the many mysteries that surrounded it. But this was something entirely new, something he couldn't begin to understand. The camera zoomed in, capturing the coffin lid with perfect clarity. The lid lifted again, slightly higher this time, and the team could see a faint outline of the body inside. The arms of Thomas Richards were now moving, slowly at first, as if regaining strength after a long period of inactivity. But then, the movement became more pronounced. His hand reached out, and the fingers, stiff at first, began to curl and uncurl in a deliberate motion. Lydia gasped. It's alive!" She didn't say it loudly, but the words hung in the air like a heavy weight. How could this be possible? The body had been dead, rigor mortis had set in, and yet, here it was, moving. Alive, or something else entirely? Dr. Hale's mind raced. He had been skeptical about theories of the afterlife, about paranormal phenomena, but what they were witnessing right now defied logic. This wasn't a medical phenomenon, not one that could be explained by anything they had studied. No medical textbooks, no research papers had ever prepared him for this. "I need to check his vitals." "Immediately," Dr. Hale said, taking a step forward. The rest of the team began working quickly, trying to gather as much data as they could. They checked the heart rate, the brain activity, but nothing was normal. No heartbeat, no brainwave activity. Yet the body was moving as if it were alive. The camera's lens focused on the coffin lid, now more than halfway open, and the body inside was fully visible. The stillness of the room was replaced by an almost oppressive sense of fear. What would happen next? Suddenly, with one final, forceful movement, the coffin lid slammed open, and the body inside sat up. It wasn't a jerky motion like you would expect from someone waking up from sleep. It was a slow, deliberate movement, almost mechanical. The body, now sitting upright, turned its head toward the camera. Its eyes, though vacant, seemed to be focused. "Oh my God," Lydia muttered, her voice filled with horror. It's awake." Dr. Hale couldn't speak. His hands were shaking as he tried to make sense of what was happening. The body in front of him wasn't just a corpse. It was something alive, something with purpose. But what was driving it? What force was animating this body? And more importantly, Where had the soul gone? The room seemed to grow colder. The hum of the machines, the frantic typing on the keyboard, and the gasps of the team all filled the air. But the silence of the body in front of them was deafening. Daniel, the lifeless body they had sealed in the coffin, was no longer just a corpse. He was a presence, alive in a way that defied logic and understanding. Lydia stepped back, unsure of what she was witnessing. This wasn't a resurrection. This wasn't science. This was something else. "We need to stop this, now before it's too late," Dr. Hale muttered under his breath. The situation was escalating too quickly. The body wasn't just moving, it was becoming aware. The researchers were now faced with an urgent choice. What did they do now? As the body in the coffin stared at them, still unmoving but now fully aware, Dr. Hale's mind screamed for answers. He had crossed a line that should never have been crossed. The moment the coffin lid shifted, the room was filled with a collective gasp. Everyone froze, staring at the screen in disbelief. The faint movement that had been seen earlier was no longer subtle. The lid was clearly lifting, slowly, but unmistakably. Dr. Hale's heart raced. He tried to comprehend what was happening, but his scientific mind was at a loss. Bodies don't do this. There had to be an explanation, an electrical malfunction perhaps, or some kind of technical glitch in the system, but no matter how hard he tried to convince himself, he couldn't shake the reality of what was unfolding before him. "What's happening? Why is it moving?" Lydia, one of the younger assistants, whispered. Her voice was trembling as she stared at the screen. Dr. Hale turned toward her, his face pale. "I don't know. I don't know what's causing this." He could feel his hands shaking as he reached for the control panel. He needed to stop this. He needed to pull the plug, cut the feed, end the experiment. But something inside him hesitated. What if this was the breakthrough he had been searching for? What if they had just uncovered something monumental? The coffin lid creaked louder, and now the body inside was visible. As the lid continued to rise, the researchers could see more clearly. The body of Thomas Richards, still lifeless, was beginning to adjust its posture in the coffin. It was as though the body was responding to something, preparing itself to move. "It's coming out," another assistant gasped. The body inside was starting to sit up. The arms were pushing against the sides of the coffin, and the head was turning from side to side. The body was no longer just twitching, it was actively moving. Lydia backed away from the screen in horror. "This is impossible." She couldn't tear her eyes away, even as she wished she could unsee what she was witnessing. Dr. Hale remained rooted to his spot, his mind racing. His years of training, his research, everything he thought he knew about the human body was being completely dismantled. This wasn't science. This was something else. "Pause the footage," Dr. Hale barked, his voice a mixture of panic and disbelief. One of the assistants scrambled to stop the feed, but no one spoke for a few moments. The room was dead silent except for the hum of the machinery. Everyone stared at the frozen image on the screen, still processing what they had seen. The body of Thomas Richards was sitting up, as though it had just woken from a long sleep. His chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, and his eyes were moving. "He's alive," Lydia whispered, her voice shaky. It was a statement, but there was no certainty in it. She was too scared to be certain of anything. "No, that's not possible. He's dead. He's supposed to be dead." Dr. Hale finally spoke, his voice rising with frustration. He was clenching his fists, trying to force some rational explanation to come to him, but nothing made sense. The science he had trusted his entire career on had just been shattered. Lydia's hand trembled as she pointed at the screen. "Look at his eyes. They're following us. He sees us." Sure enough, Daniel's eyes, which had been closed only moments ago, were now open, and they were focused on the camera. Dr. Hale's mouth went dry. "This is not just a twitch. It's not a malfunction. It's conscious movement." There was no denying it now. This body wasn't just alive, it was aware. The room fell into an eerie silence, and the weight of what was happening became more real by the second. The body in the coffin was reacting, breathing, and showing signs of awareness. But the questions now swirled around their heads. What was happening to him? What had happened to him in that coffin? Dr. Hale's mind raced for answers. Could this be some strange form of survival instinct? Could there be some unknown biological reaction to the way the body was treated? But as the body continued to move, sitting up further, the truth became increasingly clear. This wasn't something they could explain with science. This can't be real. This isn't real, Lydia repeated, almost as if trying to convince herself. It's real, Dr. Hale said quietly, his eyes never leaving the screen. And we need to figure out what's going on. The team stood there in stunned silence, watching as Daniel's body slowly but steadily pushed itself up. The room fell silent and the tension was palpable. Every researcher stood frozen, their eyes locked on the screen as the lid of the coffin creaked ever so slightly. The body inside was moving. It wasn't just the hand twitching anymore. The whole body was shifting, as if trying to break free from its confines. This can't be happening, one of the assistants muttered, his voice shaking. He took a step back, visibly disturbed. Dr. Hale stood motionless in front of the screen, his mind racing. What was happening? His scientific background told him that this was impossible, yet the footage was right in front of him. The camera had been placed in a perfectly sealed coffin, and yet now something inside was struggling to get out. Was it a delayed reaction? Was it some kind of unknown phenomenon? Before anyone could speak, the coffin lid moved again. It wasn't a subtle shift anymore. This time it was louder, more forceful. The lid actually began to lift, inch by inch, as if something inside was pushing against it with all its strength. "Get it out, now!" Dr. Hale shouted, his voice full of panic. He had to see what was happening. There was no time to waste. The team rushed forward, but their hands trembled with fear as they began to pry the coffin open. It took only a few moments, but it felt like an eternity. Finally, the lid of the coffin was fully open, revealing the body inside. But it wasn't what they had expected. Daniel, the man they thought was dead, was no longer lifeless. His eyes were wide open, his pupils dilated in a blank, eerie stare. His chest was rising and falling with shallow breaths, and his body was covered in a thin layer of sweat. The color had returned to his skin, and his limbs, once stiff with rigor mortis, were now moving. Slowly, cautiously, but with intention. The team backed away, unable to look away from what they were witnessing. This wasn't just a body coming back to life. It was something else, something unnatural. "Is he alive?" Lydia, the youngest member of the team, whispered in disbelief. Her voice was small, but it carried the weight of a question no one knew how to answer. Dr. Hale stepped closer, his own fear palpable. He reached out a trembling hand, unsure if he should touch the body. But before he could, Daniel's hand moved. His fingers twitched, then slowly curled as if they were testing their own strength. The team gasped collectively as Daniel's head shifted slightly and his eyes locked onto Dr. Hale. The moment their gazes met, Daniel's lips parted. Why am I here?" His voice was weak, ragged, and barely audible, but it was enough to make everyone in the room freeze. Lydia stumbled backward, her heart racing. He's talking?" she whispered. Dr. Hale, his mind spinning, could hardly process the words. How could this be happening? He had seen people come back from the dead, but this wasn't that. This was something far more complex. "What do you remember?" Dr. Hale asked, his voice steady despite the surge of fear in his chest. He had to know. What had happened to Daniel? Daniel's eyes seemed to focus as if he was trying to recall something. His face contorted in confusion, and for a moment it looked like he was struggling with his thoughts. Then his voice broke through again, this time stronger. "I remember darkness." Daniel's words were slow, as if every syllable took effort. "I remember being trapped, buried, but then I woke up." The room was filled with silence as the team tried to absorb what they were hearing. Dr. Hale took a step back, rubbing his temples in disbelief. This wasn't just a medical mystery anymore. This was something far deeper, far more terrifying. "We need to get him to a hospital," Lydia whispered, her voice trembling. Dr. Hale didn't respond immediately. He didn't know what to say. What was he supposed to do with a person who had returned from the dead? What was Daniel now? Was he truly alive? Was he a ghost? Or was there something far darker at work here? As the team began to move into action, ready to get Daniel medical help, Dr. Hale's eyes flickered back to the camera monitor. For just a moment, he caught a glimpse of the footage they had captured. Daniel's hand moving again, but this time, it wasn't a twitch. It was as if the body was testing its strength, preparing for something more. The truth was clear now. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The room fell into a deep, uneasy silence, and as they began to leave the lab, no one spoke.
Subscribe and press the bell icon so that you never miss the amazing
and
video.
what they had just uncovered would raise questions that could never be answered.